Если я не хочу дать United Kingdom флаг вот так.
Положишь в сумку.
Да, мне нужно вот так.
Hello.
Я могу сейчас белого?
I might leave this here. It's a bit too hot. Ah, new haircut, huh? Привіт, козаче, як справи? Привіт.
5, дай.
А, правильно, правильно.
Ты с белой не знаешь.
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! Thank you very much for coming here, my friends. Always remember that coming here and making your voice be heard for the whole world is unbelievably important for people to know what's going on in Ukraine. Before we go any further, we're going to start this rally as we always do with the Ukrainian anthem.
Ще нам
Україна! Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
Ворогам України тричі!
Смерть! Смерть! Смерть!
My friends, every single person in the world needs to understand what's going on around them, so that we do not allow terrible regimes to come to pass, so that we do not allow the people who want to take away all of our freedoms to take that power and be able to make us powerless. We need to be able to understand it. We need to be able to act in the right time to stop such things from happening. The best prevention to these kinds of regimes taking over is to speak. To tell the whole world what's going on, to exchange ideas. That is the term of freedom of speech. People are able to exchange these ideas and come to better conclusions. But in Russia, there is no freedom of speech. In Russia, there is no power for the people to do something about it unless, of course, they rebel against the government. And at long last, they are starting to show signs of rebellion. At long last. Should have happened long ago. It should have happened in 2008, when the Russian terrorists invaded Georgia. It should have happened in 2014, when they invaded Ukraine for the first time, and it annexed Crimea and destabilized Donbas. It should have happened 2 years ago, when this war started. More than 2 years ago, in fact. And yet, my friends, it's better late than never. So we have to show the whole world that Putin is not omnipotent, that Putin cannot mobilize all of Russia, that Putin will not be able to win, because the Russian terrorist regime's elites are counting on the West losing interest, on the West having a low attention span, on the West starting to care about other things, less important things than the war in Europe with an expansionist regime who has already made threats and promises of expanding this war beyond Ukraine to Moldova, to the Baltic countries, to Poland. NATO countries, by the way. Poland and the Baltic countries, that is. All of them, NATO countries. If NATO is fine to just stand aside and allow Russia to do whatever they want in Ukraine, imagine a scenario where Russia decides to take a village in Estonia and say, oh, 90% of the people in this village are Russians, we have the right to do it. What's NATO going to do? Well, my friends, if appeasers and apologists such as Orban make their voice prevail, then NATO will do nothing. And after the first village, there will be a second one, and a third one, and in a city, a capital, all of Estonia, all of Latvia, all of Lithuania. And we'll have people on the other side of the world, ignorant people, say, oh, but we have no borders with Russia, let them take these countries. Let them do whatever the hell they want. As a certain politician has said in the past. We will not name any names of this individual, but I'm sure that the people who are politically savvy know who we are talking about. But we will name some other names, like Fico and Orban and Tucker Carlson, who supposedly went to Russia for freedom of speech. Except he did not ask a single legitimate question to Putin. He was there, simply stroking Putin's ego, shoe-shining him. Now, people could argue that he was scared for his life, but why even go there? Why go there with the pretense of enforcing freedom of speech, when all you're going to do is fill up your pockets with rubles? What other point was there? And in fact, it seems like Tucker Carlson was not paid enough. Because right after that little incident, he started trash-talking Putin on a few key points. Like, for example, the denazification idea. Tucker Carlson said it was the stupidest thing he's ever heard. If only he had said it straight in Putin's face. I mean, I thought that was what freedom of speech was, right? To be able to speak freely, unafraid of the consequences. So why did he not tell this to Putin? Why did he not interrupt Putin when he was mentioning denazification? Why did he not tell him, look, Mr. Putin, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now that would have made a scoop. It would have been very interesting to see that on our television, right? Or on the computer these days. But my friends, we must not trust these individuals. They're not fighting for freedom of speech. They're not fighting for conservatism. Tucker Carlson, the conservative. Laughable. These individuals who claim that Russia needs to be left alone, that Ukraine is a step too far. Oh, that evil NATO expansion. Oh, how dare they. NATO is a voluntary organization. The only countries that are part of NATO are the ones who wished and who chose to join NATO. In fact, very often, those countries begged and demanded to join NATO, just to be protected from the Russian terrorist regime. But then we hear these apologists say, oh, but Russia was provoked. There was a treaty, you see, a treaty with Russia, where we promised them not to expand to the east. And what I would usually like to ask these people is, what was this treaty called? They never know the answer, because there was none. It never happened. Complete revisionist history. Even Mikhail Gorbachev, the man who ended the Soviet Union, their last dictator, who was in these discussions with the West about the expansion of NATO, about the Warsaw Pact, about the Soviet Union, he was interviewed himself, and he said that no one was cheated. The West promised not to expand into Soviet lands. The Soviet Union was no more. The Warsaw Pact was no more. Russia, in fact, this is the best part. Russia has accepted the sovereignty of all of those states who decided to join NATO. I guess somebody forgot what sovereignty truly means. My friends, sovereignty means you have a choice. You have a choice in terms of what you're going to do. And that choice does not entail crawling to Russia on your knees and begging them, can we pretty please join NATO? Can we pretty please join the EU? No. If Russia has accepted the sovereignty of Ukraine, if it has accepted the sovereignty of Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, Russia has no say, not now, not ever, over what those countries do, or what organization they decide to join. It's as simple as that, my friends. All of the rest is mere distractions used by these Russophiles and by these apologists to try to excuse Russian aggression against Ukraine. But we need to know the truth. We need to know it so that we can tell it to everyone. And we can speak to the whole world. World, wake up!
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 More sanctions on Russia!
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 Seize Russian assets!
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 This conversation about the seizure of assets has been going on for a long time. Unfortunately, many people say it's a step too far. How though? We all see it very clearly that Russia is ruled by criminals, by crooks. They've amassed all of that money by a crime. It's dirty money. This could be called the biggest anti-money laundering scheme in humanity. If we take that money away from the money they stole from the Russian people, from the Ukrainian people, from all the peoples they have ruled in the past, and we can give it to the people who need it the most. The Ukrainian people who are fighting for freedom, who are the bulwark of democracy and of the values of the West. To allow Ukraine to fall is to take the step many steps closer, to take the West many steps closer to its demise. We need to understand that. Every life of a Ukrainian saved today is a life of a Westerner saved in the future. A life that might be lost fighting against a more powerful and more brazen Russia. Why risk Western lives in the future if they can be saved by saving Ukraine? Especially considering the fact that this promise has been made already in the past. In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum, in which Ukraine gave up the third biggest nuclear arsenal in the world in exchange for nothing more but the peace agreement with Russia. And what did the Ukrainian people get in return? Russia, a terrorist state, violated this agreement and has attacked Ukraine plenty of times and is now engaged in a full-scale war with Ukraine, where the only weapon they have not yet used because they're afraid of Western retaliation are the nuclear weapons. That use every other weapon at their disposal. Laughably so, they have lost 1/3 of their fleet against a country with no fleet whatsoever. Now that is a good one. That's a good scoop, I'd say. And from the West, what do we hear from the West? Ukraine fatigue. Oh, but this costs money. Oh, but Ukraine is corrupt. Was Ukraine not corrupt when the Budapest Memorandum was signed? Would it not cost money back then to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia? So why then? Why was Ukraine encouraged? Why was Ukraine pushed into signing this agreement and giving up all of their nuclear weapons? So that in the end, we can hear excuses instead of legitimate, real help. Is that how the free world behaves when the chips are down, when negotiations finish? As the saying goes, when diplomacy ends, war begins. And diplomacy has ended with Russia very long ago. The talks we've been having with Russia, the peace treaties we've been having with Russia are nothing more but distractions by the Russian terrorist regime. And right now at this moment, we can prove it very easily, in fact. There's many occasions of this happening, but I would like to focus on one particular occasion, which is absolutely unquestionable, no matter who you ask. The second Minsk agreement would entail a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, or rather in those days, between the Donbas republics and the Ukrainian people. However, when the second Minsk agreement was signed, the Russians had an advantage in a certain battle, the Battle of Debaltseve. You guys might have heard about it before, especially the people who are savvy about this war. The Battle of Debaltseve was perhaps the worst Ukrainian defeat that Ukraine ever suffered against Russia. Why, you might ask, was that defeat suffered? Well, the battle was ongoing. When peace was signed, why did the battle not stop? Well, because the Russians betrayed their agreement the next day. They felt like they had a local advantage. And they continued to attack the Ukrainians, who were expecting them to stop. Because of course, if you sign a peace treaty with someone, if you sign a ceasefire, it means the fire ceases. Isn't that right? If you have signed a peace treaty with your enemies, it means your enemies need to stop attacking you. That's what the Ukrainians were expecting. But the Russians, they've signed this treaty and they use this expectation to surround Ukrainian troops and to claim victory in the Battle of Debaltseve. Treachery was their tool to victory. This is why, a few days after the Minsk agreement, the Battle of Debaltseve has ended. Not before, but after. Because the Russians did not care. They did not care about whatever they signed. They only cared about short-term benefit. Because they still believe that they're going to get away scot-free in this situation. They need to be shown that there will be no escape for those who have committed such heinous crimes as they have. The only way for us to do that, my friends, is together. All together, we will win!
All together, we will win!
All together, we will win.
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 Stop Russia, stop the war.
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 Russia is a terrorist state.
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 Today are the elections in Russia. Now we all know what's going to happen in these elections. These elections are not to pick the next president of Russia. No, these elections are to pick the next Putin of Russia. I wonder who's going to win, truly. But fortunately, the Russian opposition is starting to move now. Fortunately, they're finally starting to show a backbone. They're starting to push back in protest against these sham elections. They're pouring paint over the ballots. They're burning the ballots. They're signing for many candidates in the ballots. And that is something good. It's the first step. We all need to start somewhere. And the liberation of the Russian people will have to happen soon. Now that the Ukrainian heroes are fighting, it needs to happen now, not after. There are some Russian battalions fighting against the Russian terrorist regime in Ukraine. And that's good. There should be more of those. A lot more. In fact, it should have happened long ago. We could even say that. However, my friends, we need to spread one message above all others to the whole world. That the war in Ukraine is not merely just a problem of the Ukrainian people. The war in Ukraine is a problem for the whole earth. It's a global problem for everybody. Everybody's skin is in this game. As the saying goes, it's quite funny. No fire is too hot until it's your hide that's burning. That can be said about many people who did not care in 2014 when Ukraine was attacked first. Who did not care 2 years ago. Some of them who still don't care now. But my friends, we live in a global world where every single local problem has a global imprint, global consequences. The flap of a butterfly's wings can cause a tornado on the other side of the earth. It's an ancient saying, and it could not be held truer than nowadays. Even something small happening on one corner of the earth can have major consequences on the other. And this is not something small. This is a huge deal. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. A lot of them civilians. Who the Russian terrorist regime continues to shell, continues to attack, continues to terrorize. That's what we would call a terrorist regime. Indeed. Just around a week ago, the Russians have attacked Odessa with their rockets and with their shelling. They have attacked living quarters where civilians lived. The first attack, 12 people died, 5 of them children. In the second attack, they tried to assassinate Zelensky because he was having a meeting with some Greek politicians, a Greek delegation, you could say. And those politicians could have been killed in this attack. But did Russia care? Did Russia consider that they might be killing people who are not part of the Ukrainian command and control structure, who have nothing to do with this war? Of course not. They do not care. They stopped caring long ago. This is why the Russians will still have some possibility of imagining a future for themselves. And not only that, but everybody around the world needs to start acting about this cause. To see that the Russian terrorist regime will not stop in Ukraine, but will continue In fact, it's already set up. It's continuation. The troops in Transnistria, a separatist region of Moldova, have been there ever since the Soviet Union has collapsed. And they're not going anywhere. Not until they are kicked out. For the benefit of the people of Moldova, I hope that they will be able to do as such. I hope that they will be able to kick these troops out and reclaim their sovereignty of their country from the Russian terrorist regime. As many others have lost their sovereignty to their terror all over the world. Right now, as a neo-colonialism being perpetrated by the Russians in sub-Saharan Africa, in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Sudan, and all these countries that supported isolationist separatist group. All over the place, the Wagner group has their dirty hands all over these places, all over these countries. In fact, we have protesters together with our Sudanese friends who oppose the Wagner intervention in Sudan, who oppose the Russian terrorist regime, and who want to have a better future for themselves, for the whole world. But ask, my friends, when we are dealing with entities like Russia, with entities like Ayatollah Iran, with entities like North Korea, diplomacy is never part of the equation. They do not intend to speak to you. They do not intend to give a quid pro quo, an exchange of favors, a compromise. No, they want to have it all. If you give them half of what they want, they'll be unhappy. They will want it all either way. If you give them everything that they are demanding, they will take it, and next time, they will demand double. This is how the mentality of the Russian terrorist regime works. That is why it's in the interest of every single person on earth to stop them. Arm Ukraine as you promised.
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 Fight the jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
The air defense in particular has been very, very successful in Ukraine. Not only protecting Ukrainian people from the shameless and merciless Russian shelling and rocket attacks, but also by knocking down the Russian fighter jets too close to the Ukrainian border. They've been very successful with that. But Ukraine needs more of them, so that all of Ukraine can be protected, so that Ukrainian people will not have to be afraid at night, too scared to fall asleep, with the possibility of never waking up again. My friends, we need to remember what was promised in the past, and we need to remember how wars are waged, because a war is being waged against us right now, at this very moment. And we are oblivious to it. We act as if the world is in peace, but it is not. There is local peace, sure, but there is also local war by entities who plan to expand more and more, by entities who will use hybrid warfare against you. Putin has weaponized every single quality of Russia that he could ever weaponize. He has weaponized the Russian language. He has weaponized the Russian culture. He has weaponized the Russian ethnicity. He is weaponizing the Russian sportsmen also. It's a very funny discussion to hear people say, oh no, the sportsmen, they have nothing to do with Russia, they're neutral. Well, the next day when they return to Russia, they shake hands with Putin and receive grants from him. It's very funny, truly. And some of these sportsmen actually wear the Z swastikas of the Russians right now. So these conversations about how Russian culture, Russian language, Russian sports is unrelated to this war is absolute nonsense, my friends. They are related because Putin has made them be related. And the only way to make them unrelated once again is to stop Putin. Arms keep peace. This is an ancient saying that holds true nowadays, my friends. A saying that people need to remember. A saying that the whole world needs to remember. Unfortunately, some countries in Europe have forgotten what's the price of simply allowing authoritarians to expand. They have forgotten the lessons learned at World War II. When Hitler annexed Austria, they allowed him. They allowed him to expand, to consolidate. And nowadays, we can hear Putin himself claim that supposedly World War II started because the Polish had provoked Hitler. Now that is the funny part. He claims he's denazifying Ukraine whilst blaming the Polish people for World War II. A people who were the victim of World War II, one of the main victims, in fact. Truly, it would be funny if it weren't so sad. If it weren't so sad that some people still believe in him. But it's worse than that, my friends. It's far worse. Because the main problem with this whole situation is not the small minority of Z-zombies who shout, Putin, Putin. They are not the problem. The problem are the ignorant masses of people who do not understand how Putin is coming for their throats, coming to kill them, to enslave them, and to annihilate them. They do not understand this. Because the war is not happening here, not yet. Because Putin does not have a border with the United Kingdom. Well, my friends, Nazi Germany did not need to have a border with the United Kingdom to commit the Blitz, to engage in the battle for Britain. It was not necessary to have a direct border back then. Is it now? That humanity's weapons are far more developed. It is in everybody's interest to support Ukraine, to finally stop the Russian terrorist regime, to end this war once and for all. Because, my friends, we have attempted to negotiate with Putin many times, and they have betrayed every single bit of negotiations. Every single treaty, they have betrayed it. And if you want specifics, that's fine too. Look up the Budapest Memorandum. Look up the Ukraine-Russia Friendship Treaty. Look up both the Minsk agreements that we have covered a while ago. One of them betrayed just the day after it was signed. Because the Russians felt like they had a local advantage on the battlefield. That was enough. Enough for them to backpedal on every single one of their words, every single one of their promises. That is enough, my friends. You have to ask yourself, what is truly preventing Russia from expanding any further? What is truly preventing Russia from using those dreaded nuclear weapons we hear so much about? Almost every week these days, every single time something does not go as Putin wants, which is almost every time that anything happens, it threatens nuclear war. Finally, now, Macron has answered. He has said that it is unwise to threaten another nuclear power like France. At long last, one of the European politicians has developed a backbone. At long last, we started to push back a little bit, not too much. But that's good. It's a good start. And it's even better considering where Macron stood 2 years ago. One of the main non-interventionists. Now, finally, people are starting to see this. But my friends, to see is not enough. We need to act. We need to do what needs to be done. Because the only thing that it takes for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. That is the reality on this earth. And that is why we need to keep moving forward. Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
Слава нації!
Смерть ворогам!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Україна!
Понад усе!
Героям України тричі!
Слава! Слава! Слава!
And now, my friends, we will have a short musical break.